Okay, so this is a review for the Lab Practical 2 for General Biology, and I'm just going to go over a little bit of what you need to study, just to remind you. So remember that part of the exam is going to have genetics on there, where we were learning a lot about Punnett squares, and we learned a lot about genotype and phenotype. And so make sure you know just some of the terminology like alleles, and if I were to give you an example of a trait that was dominant or recessive. And so if I said, if a person has, if widow's peak is dominant, big W, and straight hairline is recessive, little w, what's the phenotype of an individual that's big W, big W? So that would be widow's peak, right? And then I'll have some Punnett squares on there that you'll have to look at, and then I'll ask you questions like, what are the chances of a child having this trait? If this is a recessive trait, if this is a dominant trait, what's the chances? And then also there'll be a part where you have to do your own Punnett square and answer a question, so be prepared to do your own Punnett square as well. And then also you do make sure you go over the X-linked inheritance. I'll give you a Punnett square with an X-linked inheritance example, and I'll ask you the chances, what's the chances that a daughter will have this or that a son will have that. So remember remember that whenever you're looking at the Punnett square, and I say, what's the chances of a son being colorblind, for example, just look at the ones that are the sons, X, Y. And so if one would be colorblind and one is not, then that's a 50% chance, right? Also remember that you need to know about a karyotype, and you need to know about the syndromes like Turner syndrome, Klinefelter syndrome. You don't have to know their symptoms, but I expect you to know like XO is Turner syndrome, something like that. And as far as for pedigrees, make sure that you can recognize if a pedigree is going to be like autosomal dominant, autosomal recessive, X-linked recessive, or X-linked dominant. And then with DNA, remember complementary base pairing, that A and T go together, G and C pair up with each other. But then if we were talking about DNA to RNA, like RNA, like in an mRNA strand, remember that the RNA would have U instead of T. And so if there was an A in the DNA, there would be a U in the RNA. And then make sure you know the bonds that hold the bases together in the DNA molecule. And then I'm going to have examples of the molecules like this one here, DNA molecule. See, it's double-stranded, so we know it's a DNA molecule. And then here's an RNA molecule, is single-stranded, so we can tell it's an RNA molecule. So be able to recognize that basic information. And also if I have a nucleotide, so let me break one of these off. So here's a nucleotide. I have the phosphate, and then the yellow piece here represents the sugar, and then this white piece here is representing the base. So make sure that if I had that on there and I was asking you, like if I had the parts labeled, two of the parts labeled, and then I ask you for what's this other part, there's three parts, sugar, phosphate, or base. Make sure that you could label those. And then just know some general information about DNA, like the enzyme that's used during transcription. Make sure that you can tell me what an anticodon is. If I give you the codon, what's the anticodon for that. Know the molecules that are involved in transcription, the DNA and the mRNA, and the molecules involved in translation, like mRNA, tRNA, amino acids. And then for the taxonomy, there's pretty much just some definition questions for that. Remember, you had that sheet look like this, or of course I got the answers here, but we had like the reconstruction and study of evolutionary relationships with systematics. Make sure that you go through those. I'm going to have those definition questions on there where I give you the definition, and then it's multiple choice, so you have to know that. So That's pretty much what you need to study for the test. So please let me know, email me or something, or see me before class or after class if you have any questions.